And welcome back. Okay, so welcome to the non-spoiler section about this version of Freddy Fazbear, the star of the show. Or at least that's what he would call himself. In the comic or series, he wouldn't actually be the star of the show. You know what I mean? Despite being 5 foot tall like everyone else, and like everyone else being slightly childish in personality, Freddy has the deepest voice out of all of the animatronics and resembles the voice of like a man in his late 30s or maybe early 40s. You know, like those stern father-like voices. If I had to give a random actor or voice actor that I would give as an example of what he'd sound like, I would pick whoever the guy who played Captain Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. If you know that character, you know that character. Very dry, very deep, very serious, but comes off a little bit silly because of how serious they are in circumstances where things are just chaotic and goofy. He has one of those voices that like rumbles in the back of your ear. I would say he's probably the most mature on a surface level compared to the other animatronics. He's a really vigilant rule follower and will be the first animatronic to point out if something they're doing is breaking the rules. Now, Freddy does have the ability to break through the system like the others. Specifically, he has the ability to randomly access the announcement system, just like Melody, but he rarely does this and only really uses it as a reminder of how much longer they have until the end of the night shift so that they can return back to their stage and to yell at people who are running around doing things that are inappropriate. He's the first person to tell Chica that she cannot eat real food and that she's going to damage her inside. The first person to tell Foxy to try to behave himself and to not use such a potty mouth. And the first one to remind everyone that they're not supposed to be playing with the night guard or talking to him, and that they're only supposed to be moving around to make sure that they're not getting rusty from the lack of movement after hours or over the weekend. Technically, the restaurant is open over the weekend. However, a lot of times in the beginning or pizzeria closes a little bit earlier on the weekends unless a party is specifically rented out, and because of that, they have a lot more time to run around or are a lot more time that they're not in use. Parents completely hate that they close earlier on the weekends by an hour, even though they're open earlier and kids technically are awake earlier to go to the pizzeria since, during the weekday, there's no point in opening it super early since most of the kids are probably in school, unless it's summer. Summer, they're open way longer than they normally are, except for Halloween. They're open during the day and then they're also open at nighttime. They only close for like a few hours in order to change the decorations in the pizzeria, and that's because they do a horror-themed attraction temporarily on Halloween night to draw in as many customers as possible. Because although they're trying to move away from the scary image, they can't completely deny it, so they decide to soften it with making it kind of a joke and poking fun at it, saying, look, we're in on the joke. It was so long ago, let's just move on. Ooh, spooky. The company has even gone as far as giving the characters temporary costumes during Halloween and letting them sing songs off of a restricted list that they're normally not allowed to sing. This list consists of fan songs based off of a rogue indie developer's games franchise, based off of the horrors that happened that Freddy Fazbear has been fighting with for years, but has now become a little bit more accepting of in recent years. And because this is a location located the heart of where Freddy's used to be, this location even has the luxury of having authentic Freddy Fazbear artifacts for the Halloween stuff, especially since the owners of the Fazbear Fright attraction that burned down and the current owners of the reboot restaurant were friends, meaning when the owner of the Fazbear Fright attraction died and his location burned down, all of the leftover material was shipped over to this restaurant. All of the props that could be salvaged went there. All of them. With all that in mind, Freddy, of course, knowing how the animatronics really aren't supposed to talk about any of this, and finding it frustrating that they now have to talk about it for an entire day and even change up their routine and costumes into ridiculous, ever-changing, costumes, you can see how Freddy might hate the Halloween event most of all. Away from Halloween, let's get into Freddy's relationships with the other animatronics. Freddy is completely neutral towards Melody and just sees her as a member of the crew, with the exception of the times he has to yell at her to not move during the day, specifically yell at her after it already happened because he can't move during the day, but she can. Other than that, they really don't have much of a relationship at all. Bonnie, as mentioned in his video, looks up to Freddy. Meanwhile, Freddy acknowledges that Bonnie is in fact his second in command, and will often have Bonnie help him go down a checklist to make sure the restaurant is neat and tidy. Ironically, Freddy's hobby is literally just cleaning. He will literally re-clean the restaurant after the janitors have already came in and cleaned when the place closed, like a couple hours earlier, because he's convinced that the restaurant is still dirty, and to be fair, it is. That place is never fully clean. Sticky floors, child vomit, horrible things parents let the kids do on the floor. Don't even step in the ball pit. Freddy hates the ball pit. He understands the concept of germs, and although he himself can't get sick, he will go on a long rant about how much he hates that ball pit. Anyways, back to Bonnie. The only thing that I have to say else about Bonnie and Freddy's relationship is that Freddy either doesn't notice or does not care that Bonnie has a mean streak, because as far as he's concerned, Bonnie is the most well-behaved animatronic there. Next up is Chica. As mentioned earlier, Freddy often has to remind Chica to not eat real food, because that means the maintenance lady has to show up, and nobody wants the maintenance lady to show up, because if one animatronic is broken, she will use that as an excuse to repair all of the animatronics. And although Freddy is probably the least scared of her, he still acknowledges the fact that the maintenance lady is kind of a menace that none of them want near them. Other than that, he sees Chica as a well-behaved animatronic and, well, as a member of the main Free. The three of them tend to move together as a single unit most nights. Moving on to the probably most obvious relationship, since it's been mentioned at least a few times before, Freddy and Foxy do not get along. Freddy basically considers Foxy an outsider, even though he's a part of the OG squad and is a reboot character just like him. He considers Pirates Cove its own thing, and Foxy's insistence that he is a part of the main gang to be annoying when it's Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica, and Foxy is just the other animatronic. And of course, Melody's technically the other animatronic, but to be fair, she's a part of the crew, and so is Foxy, but there's a bit of a hierarchy, Freddy would insist. Then there's his relationship with Goldie, which, again, skipping to when Goldie comes up properly in the story. Lastly, there is the Night Guard, which Freddy considers himself the boss of, although he also points out the fact that the animatronics aren't supposed to talk to the Night Guard, so it's kind of a bit of hypocrisy on Freddy's part that he thinks he can boss around the Night Guard. And as you probably noticed as I'm describing each member of the crew, every single animatronic here has a slightly unlikable personality once you get past the characters they play, and that is very intentional. These are traits from the original story from middle school. Of course, there have been added some new additions to the story, like the rogue indie developer, and some of the design changes I've made because Security Breach. But I figured, you know what? It reminds me of Security Breach. Why not lean into it and make it so that this series is sort of a in-between shot between Security Breach and not Security Breach, or, you know, an AU or something.